JJ Meets World is brought to you by Weedman Design. Adam Weedman founded Weedman Design Company in 2016 on the belief that one-on-one relationships are more important than being a one-stop shop. Adam works with you to get your message across and to make you look good to your clients. Because let's face it, in this day and age where it's easier than ever to be visible, if you don't look good, you look bad. Adam happened to design the JJ Meets World logo, so we've got a special spot in our heart for him. If you need to see all the other amazing things that he's done, you want to check out weedmandesign.co. So log on and type in WIEDMAN design.co.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
There are certain holidays that I associate with television specials. For example, when Easter rolls around, I think of Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids and their special Easter episode where they want to help old Mudfoot with his shack, and so they fix up the shack, but one of the kids decides to play a prank, and he takes, he makes the ladder all rickety, not knowing that old Mudfoot was going to go up the ladder. And Mudfoot does, and he falls, and he ends up having to go to the hospital. And then I think it's Rudy. Rudy feels really sad about what he's done. And, of course, Fat Albert tells him, you gotta go in and apologize. Only he does a better voice than I could do. So he goes in and apologizes, and Mudfoot's in the hospital. And the whole time I'm watching this with a 21st century eye thinking, well, that's it for Mudfoot. He'll be in debt for the rest of his life. There's no way this guy who lives pretty much in a junkyard has health insurance. Now, you take something like Christmas, one of my favorite Christmas specials that's on every single year. Well, actually, Christmas commercials specifically. I'll watch the Hershey's Kisses where the kisses are the bells, or the Ebenezer Scrooge, Honey Nut Cheerios, of course, the brilliant Flintstones one where Barney pretends to be Santa so he can eat Fruity Pebbles. I remember leaving Fruity Pebbles out for Santa Claus because it's well, that's what they ate on the Flintstones commercial, so we should go with that. Whoever does the marketing for the Flintstones have had some real weird things that have latched on forever, because they're not making new episodes of the Flintstones.
But there's still for vitamins, right?
There's the vitamins. Flintstones kids, and Flintstones kids, 1 million strong and growing. Who would have put that together? And they never tried to rebrand. They always want to go with the Flintstones vitamins. Kids don't even know what those characters are anymore. They don't know who Dino is. They don't know who Wilma is. Mm-hmm. But yet they're still chewing on those one-a-day vitamins.
How great was that live-action movie with John Goodman, though?
I loved it.
I love that movie.
It takes a lot of crap from people being oh, it's just like watching a gross cartoon. Well, but that's what I want.
It's the Flintstones. Yeah, and that was still at a time when CG was in movies, but it wasn't dominating. So
right.
There's so many practical effects. When Fred Flintstone slides off the Brontosaurus at the end of the workday,
yep.
That's like a big structure that they made. And
yep.
It looks fantastic.
And even little the puppetry that goes into it is just amazing. I always think to myself when I'm having a bad day at work, I go, "This job sucks," and that's a direct quote from the Flintstones movie where they've got like a pop machine, and there's a bird that chews the cap off your pop. Yeah. And so he does it for Fred Barney, and then they just have a close up. This job sucks. And I've always really gotten into that. I'm surprised. I didn't intend on talking about this, but I will.
That's fine.
One of my all-time dreams is to make a live-action Jetsons movie. I have wanted to do this for a long time. The Jetsons were my jam. Yeah. I was more of a Jetsons guy than any other cartoon, and I think now is the time where we can make a really great Jetsons movie.
Yeah.
This sort of, dystopian, utopian future where if you ever see the Jetsons animated movie that came out in the early 90s, it starts and there's so much smog on Earth that's why they live in these homes that are hovering so high up in the sky, is because we've trashed the planet. So there's a nice little environmental aspect to it.
There's no button to push
Yeah.
to clean up the environment.
If I had a magic wand, and it's getting to be the point of where they were starting to age out of these things, but I think William H. Macy would play a phenomenal George Jetson. He's got comedic chops too, so you know that he could do it justice.
You know who Mr. Spacely has to be.
It's Danny DeVito.
There's no one else.
It's Danny DeVito. I think the hardest thing is I always thought that Liam Neeson would play a great Cogswell Cog, who was the rival to Mr. Spacely. And he's hey Spacely. But the other roles in there are just could be so easily cast with funny people.
I would put Tina Fey and Amy Poehler as Betty and what's Barney's wife's name?
Oh, Betty, and then Wilma is Fred's.
Wilma, that's right. Betty.
Oh, they'd be a good team.
They'd be fantastic. I don't know who would be who.
Here's an interesting tie-in. When they made that regrettable sequel, Bedrock,
With like
Viva Rock Vegas, Jane Krasinski, I think is her name.
The director?
No, she was in 30 Rock. She played Jenna on 30 Rock.
Okay.
So there's already a Tina Fey connection with the Flintstones universe.
There was such a missed opportunity because the sequel to the Flintstones should not have been Viva Rock Vegas. It should have been the Flintstones Meet the Jetsons.
Oh my God. And you could have introduced a whole new, how come people aren't, of course at this time we weren't really thinking about universes the way we do now.
But the cartoon, what year did that come out? The animated Flintstones Meet the Jetsons?
In early to mid 80s.
Was that a made for TV movie?
It was.
That's what that, okay.
And it was great. If you didn't know what it was, Elroy, the little genius he is, invents a time machine, and the Jetsons go back to the time of the Flintstones, and Fred ends up taking the time machine back to the future. And so the Flintstones are all hanging out in the future while the Jetsons are hanging out in the past.
I'm going to scratch that idea.
Quality.
What they should do is do a sequel to the animated Flintstones Meet the Jetsons, and they should meet the Simpsons. Because Fred Flintstone and Jetson's first name is George Jetson need to be hanging out with Homer Simpson because all three of those are a play on the family sitcom. You know, they have sort of similar characters that fall into place. Plus, there's a Barney in at least two of them.
Oh my God, there is.
Yeah.
In fact, The Simpsons has done an opener based off of the Flintstones.
Can you imagine if Fred and Barney walked into Moes Tavern and sat down for a beer?
Oh, that'd be delightful.
And Moes he's hiding like saber-toothed tigers behind the bar.
Mo Sizlak, which I believe is his last name, is one of the greatest bartenders in fictional history. You might say, well, what about Sam Malone from Cheers? Nope. Or Woody. Those guys never touched on the charm that Mo brought to Moe's, especially when he turned it into Uncle Moe's, the family eatery, to try and get more people through the door. It's just one of those things that really look at this tangent. We've really kind of all over the place. Well, we're talking about seasonal specials and commercials.
Yeah, we shouldn't do these so early in the morning. Maybe
we shouldn't. In fact, this is the third time we've tried this. The other two times we were just talking about food we wanted to eat. Which, by the way, I still think that if you took a meatball and hollowed out a center part and then shoved a breadstick through there, so it's like a meatball on a stick, but you can eat the stick, there's legs there. That's $1 million idea. Coming up in this episode,
let's bridge it now. Yeah, let's bridge that to who we're talking to today.
Speaking of meatballs. We've got our first ever dual guest situation today. We're talking with Mike Ressl and Christina Johnson about Burning Man. And you'll hear, I don't know much about Burning Man. And so this is really an exploration for me into what it is. And Mike and Christina bring an interesting perspective because they are there for the build up and tear down of the Burning Man Festival.
I was really excited to get them into the studio. Mike is one of my oldest friends. We met in the 8th grade. at Brady Rupert's house. And he says...
Shout out to Brady Rupert.
Shout out to Brady Rupert. I have no idea where you are. You don't have Facebook or social media, but I hope you're doing good, Brady. I'm sure you're listening to this podcast. And I think he says it in the podcast that I was present when he first discovered Burning Man. We were in journalism class in high school, and we sat right next to each other, and we would mostly just Google. We wouldn't really... Or we'd play like games and stuff. We wouldn't actually work.
I don't believe that you used Google at that time. I believe
It was
you were probably
Yahoo.
using Netscape Navigator,
Maybe
their search engine.
Yahoo was powered by Google at that point.
Excite.com, maybe.
We were interneting.
Ask Jeeves.
And he found Burning Man there, and it has been fun to watch him become an absolute diehard because he and his girlfriend Christina, who's a good friend of mine as well, they go out there for a full month and they build and tear down the city of Burning Man. It's crazy.
And it is a city. It truly is. In fact, in the studio right now, I'm looking at like a schematic.
Yeah, that's Ressl's aerial photo. It's an aerial photograph of the city of Burning Man.
Oh, that's actually a photograph?
That's an actual photograph. Looks like a giant sea.
It's a very interesting thing. In fact, can we see if we can get that put up onto the podcasting so people can look at that as well?
Yeah.
Do we have the technology for that?
I think so.
This is why you're the producer and I'm the talent.
Yep.
So strap in, kiddos, because we have got a very exciting show with our guests Mike Ressl and Christina Johnson talking about all things Burning Man.
JJ Meets World.
Welcome to the studio, Christina Johnson and Mike Ressl. We're going to be talking a little bit about Burning Man, but first, I want to get to know you guys a little bit better. Christina, what's your jam? What do you like in life?
I'm an artist. I work for the Arts Partnership currently, and I go to Burning Man. So it's pretty much art all the time.
When you say art, what does that mean?
All of it. I guess I don't make any music, but I do pretty much all the kinds of visual art, most of them, and I do some theater, and
I follow you on Facebook, and I love when you go to restaurants that have the paper with the crayons.
right, like Rhombus guys,
Yeah, that is awesome because you seem to come up with some pretty amazing things.
yeah. Some days it works out well. Some days there's nothing flowing.
And Ressl, how about you? What's your
And
jam?
how?
Hey, JJ.
Hello.
I work for a TV show full-time right now. I also do freelance web and graphic design. I'm also an artist. This makes sense. Burning Man related stuff. I read really thick books and talk about Star Trek a lot.
So what I'm trying to kind of get here is the pulse, more or less, of who's dedicating themselves to Burning Man, because I know that you two don't just attend it, but you're a part of the setup, right?
Sure.
And then is there a tear down as well? The Burning Man 360, if we were to put it in a corporate brochure.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think everyone has kind of their own story how they found out about Burning Man or why they became interested or even went the extra mile, right? And have been doing it for so long. I was actually in the room with Tucker when I first read about Burning Man. We would read The Onion religiously in journalism class, and there was an article where the guy was joking about, I'm going to go to Burning Man next year, and there was this weird picture of this, I still don't even know what it was. It was like a giant Aztec costume. It was all at night. You couldn't really tell. There was a fire in the background. And I thought, what the hell is that? That doesn't make it. And as I read about it, is this temporary city in the desert, tens of thousands of people. It's been happening for so many years, 10, 20 years at that point. And I immediately sort of added that to the list of stuff that I thought, occupied this weird space. And at the time, I'd kind of been reading some of the other material that some of the loose philosophy was based on. At that point, they already had these sort of principles that the event was based around. It had been around long enough that it had been kind of become established. They had an organization of people that were, working with all of the agencies that were necessary. Anyway, and then when I moved to Denver and sort of started meeting people that were going and stuff, I realized it was something you could really invest a lot of yourself in and all this time. And the first year I went, I just was still completely dumbfounded by how it was actually happening and became even more impressed and excited to try to figure out ways that I could become involved. And so that's when I joined the DPW. So the DPW, Department of Public Works, is the organization that is responsible for setting up and tearing down the event. This is about 400 people, and where we both have worked many years setting all that up and kind of navigating that whole organization.
So I like to always assume that whoever's listening maybe has never heard of these things. So I'm going to ask Tucker to pull up maybe a Wikipedia article on Burning Man, and let's get some dates and stuff like that. And so you've explained the excitement of going to it and learning about it, but what is it?
So it's just this thing that started. This guy just went on the beach in San Francisco and burnt this small statue with his closest friends. His name was Larry, and it became this annual thing. And they were he's commented loosely on why he did it initially, but it was mostly for personal reasons and for fun and catharsis. And as the years went on, every year they did this, they got a little taller until it was about 40 feet tall. And there were people in this group in San Francisco that were kind of known for this avant-garde social scene. They're called the Cacophony Society. Just a small group of the people, but eventually a few hundred people show up. The cops show up and say, "Hey, you really can't burn something this big out here. This is getting out of hand." And someone pulled Larry aside and said, "Hey, I know this great place. It's like 6 hours away, but we can do whatever we want. And this won't be a problem there." And so they went out to the Black Rock Desert, which is where Burning Man is now, and that's kind of where it all started formulating. So as more and more people gradually got involved, the whole scene sort of morphed and changed, and what it is now, it just very, very gradually over time became what it is.
So I'll ask this question, and maybe you know the answer, maybe you don't, but so you can do whatever you want. So what is it privately owned land? So
no,
people
and
can do?
You can't really do whatever you want at this point. When they first went out there, they were doing whatever they wanted, shooting guns, racing cars, shooting guns while racing cars. There were some accidents. People did get hurt or die. Not a lot. I mean, just, a couple. But once the government and the Parks Department, it's state land, or federal, I should say. It's a national park. So it's subject to any of those Bureau of Land Management laws. So Burning Man now gets a permit to be out there for a certain period of time, and there are certain requirements. They have to clean up everything. So that's why there's a whole crew that stays an extra 6 weeks or so and just walks in a line, cleaning up everything they can find. They walk the whole city. And then the Bureau of Land Management comes out and tests samples of the dust, basically, in sections, and provided there's not too much crap in there, they pass and they get a permit again the next year. So they're permits for a specific number of people.
Okay.
And right now it's about 70,000.
It's what do they like to call that? Like an occupancy permit type of thing.
Yep.
So I assume, what state is this in?
Nevada.
Okay.
It's about an hour and a half north of Reno.
Okay.
The closest city, Gerlach, about a few hundred people. That's about 10 miles away from the actual site. So the Black Rock Desert is this very, very flat, dry lake bed it's filled with alkali dust. So it's not, when we say desert, but we call it the playa. So it's just Spanish for beach. But the very characteristic, this dust was literally just that, is so pervasive and
it's like a
fine.
Talc powder almost.
It adds this weird aesthetic and culture to the whole thing, because it just wears everything down, and it's like this blank canvas. Like, you have this perfectly flat earth. There are all sorts of environmental considerations at this point, but one of the things I imagined when they first went out there is that you could go all the way out for miles and miles, and no one would see.
Hearing their instructions on how to get to the event, like, it would be so far out there that at the inlet from the road to where you entered the playa, I mean, even now it's difficult to see exactly where the city is, even when it's as large as it is. I mean, you couldn't see anything when they first started it. So the instructions would be like, drive 5 miles this direction until you find this dead cow skeleton, and then take a left and go another 3 miles, and hopefully you'll hit it, I mean, it was, hearing their stories about that is pretty hilarious. And just them being like, yeah, nope, we're lost. We're just going to die out here.
Okay. So I've got a laundry list of things to ask about Burning Man, and I'm going to ask them as somebody who's never been there. In fact, here's my experience with Burning Man as a whole. There's an episode of the show Malcolm in the Middle
Yes.
where they go to
Yep.
Burning Man
Yep.
that actually changed my opinion of Burning Man.
Really? What was your opinion before that?
My opinion of Burning Man is it's a bunch of hippies getting together so that
Yes.
they can do drugs, get naked, and just kind of mess around. Pretty much what the character of Ressl thinks Burning Man is going to be at the beginning of that episode. And that episode made me go online and read more about it. And I am in just over the moon about the creative spirit that takes place as part of Burning Man and the people I know who go out there. And you don't talk to a lot of people when you bring up Burning Man, like say in an airport and somebody leans over and like, I've been to Burning Man. I go every year. I've been every year for the last 5 years.
Aren't like CEOs from just major tech companies?
are
Like
some,
Elon
yeah.
Musk goes out every year.
Yeah. I think it gets in your blood, right?
can you-
It's something that you want to do.
I mean, yeah, there's people I think who get jaded about it, who've gone, many years, and they've sort of run out of a need to be out there.
Or it becomes something specific for them. Like there are people that just go out there to work. That's what they like to do. There's some people that go out there, they work, and they leave during the event because they don't want to deal with all the people that are there.
Did you both go at the same time, or Ressl, had you been going and then Christina, you went, or vice versa?
I just started going because he was going.
Okay, so you obviously had a firsthand knowledge from being able to talk to Ressl and say like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm interested a little bit, Ressl, about what did you think it was going to be before you left?
I'm someone that kind of overdoes that part of stuff. I over prepare. To me, it was this expedition and my own personal responsibility. And like, I'm gonna survive, and I'm gonna try to make as much of this experience as I possibly can. I want to see everything and do all this stuff. So I had read a couple books. They're like crazy amount of books, but books people just talked about their experiences from the early days when things were crazy people doing much crazier things. But I had an idea in my head, as much as I tried to not have really, really strong expectations. So I went out with a sort of yes mentality. Like I'm gonna go out and read everything and meet as many people as possible. And it did it. So it sort of changed my life. And then I realized I felt there was a whole nother layer beyond that. Who are the people making this possible and that have been doing this? Because that has to be something even deeper. So in a lot of ways, it took me a lot of years where I felt like I even had an idea of like what was making it happen. And now it's this sort of there's a well-oiled machine aspect because obviously the general template hasn't changed, but it's a challenge every year, and because it disappears entirely. Every year is this completely different experience, and so it's more kind of having all those pieces readily available and together, and trying to overcome all the challenges that present themselves. I guess that makes sense.
So now that we know that Ressl's approaching it from I need to talk to all the people who make this happen and look at permits, what excited you, Christina, about going out to Burning Man?
Permits!
Paperwork.
He's done pretty good insinuating himself up the ladder. He's like, I want to know the people who really, really started this, and he works directly with them. I wanted to go because he talked about it so glowingly, even though he would sort of like stop talking about it when it came to directly addressing whether I was going to go. Like he sort of offhandedly mentioned he had this free ticket for being a regional representative, and but never really invited me like specifically. And so it was about a week out, or not a week,
That's
like
so
a month.
Ressl, by the
Like
way.
a month.
That is so Ressl.
And, like a month away. We'd been dating for about 6 months, and I wasn't sure, and I just asked him. I'm like, so do you want me to come? Like, because we haven't talked about whether you're going to give me this ticket. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. He's like, he didn't want to be responsible, and he still doesn't, for anyone else's experience out there because it can be so stressful.
Which is ironic because I help build a camp that facilitates a bunch of other people's experience.
Oh yeah. They just come out and like things are ready for them. And he's invited other people who then at least I knew to step in. Like we got a ticket. He got a ticket for another friend of ours, and wrote a card. And he kind of tried to put that attitude in words in the card. So it was like, yeah, if you come, that's cool.
Do you
Even
feel
though I'm giving you this ticket.
Do you feel like if you have to convince someone to come, they shouldn't
Oh, yeah,
attend
absolutely
this?
I
not.
feel
No.
like you get what you put into it, and so if you're out there dragging people,
Yeah, it's terrible. That would be terrible.
you can watch them not only fail miserably, but like damage themselves physically. It's trying to kill you out there. Like everything wants you to die and go away because it's just dust and the sun. And then at night it's it's super cold and empty. So it's risky. Like and it there's this weird dichotomy of the hedonistic aspects or this overstimulating that happens everywhere on the edges of the city where the fucking bass is just booming at 3 a.m. and calling you to do all the drugs and dancing. And so
I can hear it now. It's calling me now.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been to several Dave Matthews concerts, so I feel like I would fit in pretty swell out there. So, okay, so you decide you're going to go to Burning Man. What's the cost? If you're not, do you call it a volunteer or do you actually work? Do you get like a W-9 from them? Like, what's the?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
once you get paid, there's a lot of volunteers. I didn't get paid until my third year of working, partially because of the crew I was on. I never paid prior to that because I kept getting his regional ticket. So, like, we do kind of go for free.
Don't tell anybody.
Well, but I mean, you're working hard for it. So, like, is it
Yeah,
expensive?
but you can gift it. There's nothing wrong with you
it is.
gifting
So
that ticket.
It's a nonprofit, right? But they're providing porta potties and they have a few stations where they sell ice and coffee and there's a bunch of other infrastructure, right? They pay, my understanding, about 60% of the employees at DPW at least. There's full-time staff. They have an office in San Francisco, so it's around $400 as of this year. And then so all the vehicles are permitted essentially. So they try to mitigate the amount of vehicles, about $80 for that.
So really, it's just like attending any major music festival. So you're paying a ticket to get in.
Yep.
You're paying per steering wheel for vehicle that you're bringing in.
Except you're also expected to bring everything you need to survive, including food and whatever other fun
And water.
The other thing is that
Obviously, you haven't been to some of these music festivals because that is their mentality too. And if you want the water, it's going to be $12.50 a bottle.
Okay,
So
I
the
believe
interesting is that if you're going to go to a Dave Matthews concert, he's going to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this, you're bringing your own Dave Matthews. Like you're
Yeah.
bringing the stage, you're playing the music, and so. But there's a bunch of other people doing that around you, and some of them are more able or coordinated and collected than others. And so, the place across the street that's cooking 1,000 pancakes, like that's all them giving their stuff to do that. So on top of that, but all of that's optional, right? So they're not. No one's expected to, give all of their life savings to it.
And how long does it last?
So it's only a week, right around Labor Day weekend. So just 7 days. Now, like people show up early to set up, and some people don't want to leave, so they stay there as long as they can until we kick them out. But it peaks around Friday or Saturday when we light everything on fire.
Some of them just join DPW.
Yes.
So, okay. So
There are tiers too. They have low income tickets, and then they also have a sale where you can pay a whole lot more for a ticket to get it early. So it's
do they allow you to buy things like? Could you buy a space that already has like stuff set up in it? I mean,
Yes
they
and
haven't
no.
like Coachella'd this thing, have they?
Like
there
other
are people
go
that have.
Yeah, like
But not the
people will run it
organization.
like a business.
So there's like a sub economy to this. So,
So
I can buy
yeah.
my Burning Man ticket and then hire, Bernie's Burning
Oh
Man
yeah,
services.
you can hire whoever you want. I mean, we heard stories about like these Brazilian millionaires that were
Soccer team that would fly in
helicoptering every day from Reno and
Right.
back to get like fresh produce, because they just had that kind of money.
So at this point, it's become something that still is at its roots about creation and self-exploration, but it's also kind of a cool thing for people to do as well a little bit, right? So there's some people who go to Burning Man who aren't necessarily taking the full experience of it. Would you say?
It's a city. I and then beyond that, you could ask every individual person that goes, and their experience is going to be different.
Yeah.
And that's that's kind of why I said Christina had to be yours, because like you need at least one other perspective. Like I'm just one dude doing paperwork and pounding tea steaks. The money is you're never gonna keep out people that are rich or fluent, and the type of experience they have is still technically up to them. So the people that are helping them or servicing them are still choosing to participate that as well, and they have to be aware of the principles around the event. And there are people in the organization that are actually tasked with going to those camps and trying to figure out if they're still sort of being inclusive and following sort of the tenets that are set out, not like in a sense of rules, but like they don't want people taking advantage of or.
They try to discourage people from basically just creating a walled camp where they, park a bunch of gigantic RVs, create another, community inside that no one else can experience, or, that's just completely insulated, because that's not in the spirit of the event. And I mean, if you wanted to go do that, you could go do that by yourself.
Because it's a city of, 70,000, you said, roughly, give or take?
Yeah.
Are there subcultures that have been generated specifically at Burning Man that that are specific to Burning Man? Like, I just think, it's been around for 31 years. It was started in 1986. So I looked it up on Wikipedia.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But yeah, I'm just curious from a sociological perspective. When you have that many people together, there must be something really interesting going on that you can't find anywhere else in a subculture.
There are aspects to I think some of the cultures that are more distinct than others. I think what's more unique is that you have a bunch of them living next to each other, interacting. So like you have Death Guild, who runs the Thunderdome, and just wears.
Say that one more time, and say it a little slower, because I just love what you just said. It's so good.
Yeah, you have Death Guild, who runs the Thunderdome.
You have Death Guild, who runs the Thunderdome. Go to Burning Man, everybody.
And then what's beyond the Thunderdome?
So you have
that science camp is right over.
Oh,
you have Earth Guardians.
Space Mountain.
Across the street, you have Earth Guardians, and they're giving talks on sustainability and climate change and how to take care of the Earth, right? And that's sort of weird. It's not a balance. Like there's just all these different things set out. There are just groups of hundreds of body workers and healers from Colorado and all over called the Heebie-Jeebies. There's Silicon Valley tech nerds. There's candy ravers just out for the sickest drop. There's surfer bros who have some sort of wisdom to them. There are people that just want to go out and build the biggest thing they can think of that's cool and amazing. And you get people, I think, you referenced the Malcolm in the Middle episode, like their dad. I don't remember his name in the show.
Hal,
who they aren't really sure what it is, but they go all the way, and people see it happening, and their minds are blown, and that the weird pockets of that happen all over. Because there's also this interesting statistic, so there's an unofficial census. There's a whole camp called Census Camp, and that's all they do is they hand out thousands of little censuses, and they try to get people to stop, doing what the fuck they're doing and fill out this little form at Burning Man. Why would you do that? But
they'll stop them in the line as they're coming in the car. They have a station.
Sir, please
and be
put down
hey,
the hula hoop
questions.
and those tabs of acid to fill out the census.
Well, see, I want to know, the question on the census is how many hula hoops did you bring? I imagine that they don't just want to grab population aspects.
No, they don't.
They want to know how they're bringing the experience with them, right?
How many dependents do you have in your tent?
Mm-hmm. What size are the diapers you've prepped for the week?
How's the air conditioning at Burning Man? No, I'm just
it's better than you think. There's way more air conditioning out there than you'd think.
There is no standard infrastructure, right? There's no power out there. There's no plumbing. Is there water?
There is
No.
For anyone who sets it up. It's not impossible to set all of those things up.
Sure. I mean, you can bring a generator. You can bring...
And people do.
But there's nothing out there, right?
No, you have to plan to do that.
Okay, so there's no telephone pole line that comes out and goes to one switch box or anything like that.
All generators. So if you can imagine generators as big as semi trucks that sit there.
If you don't
and
like
are
the smell
on
of diesel, you shouldn't go to
day.
Burning Man.
Sure, yeah, or just don't walk towards the city if you're really fucked
Yeah,
up. That's
go
probably-
way out on the
you
edges.
might hear that, but there are layers. So like there is infrastructure in departments, and they have their own infrastructure where it makes sense. So like DPW has its own commissary. They have water lines that they run to giant tanks that get filled on a daily basis, so that they can cook the food for the people that are the electricians and the plumbers and all that stuff. So largely what we're doing out there early is we're setting up that infrastructure, and it has to happen in phases because you have to survey everything out and plan well ahead of time, and still, manage to drink as much booze as possible or whatever else everyone wants to do. Because we have our own events, pre-events, stuff like that, and it gradually builds up as people come out.
One thing that I wonder is why haven't they bought their own private parcel of land?
So they, unofficially they've that's sort of a consideration. Like it's difficult because now the event, Burning Man specifically, like, okay, there are regionals. Burning Man's now tried to outsource its sort of ethos, and there are events all over the world. But that particular event is very characterized by the environment. Even if it was just 2 miles west, it would in the pokey brush, it would not feel the same. It would not be quite as feasible. Then they did have it some years kind of on the edges of the playa where there, it was a little more varied, but it's very unlikely that it would be there. Also, because it's so flat, I think they're able to get away with certain things just in terms of the likelihood for them to actually actually impacting the land. And even though we're putting time and effort into making it as pristine as possible afterwards, that does not, it's very, very difficult to actually accomplish that. So they have purchased a parcel of land which is called Fly Ranch. So there's actually a man-made geyser 4 miles or so just west.
A man-made geyser?
Yes. So there's a bunch of hot springs all around the playa, kind of on the edges, that have come up for different reasons. I don't actually know the history of some of the other ones, but I know Fly, I think they were looking for something else, and
they're just drilling for water for for animals and stuff out there.
So we're not talking like something like super giant, but they fill some of the water trucks with it that they use to actually service the roads and stuff like that.
But it creates a big mineral structure, and the one it came up in 2 places. I can't remember why they did something, and then it dried up in the one spot and it started a new formation. So there's an old one you can see that's just sort of tall and 2-3 feet across. This one now is, it's like the size of this room at the base, and then it just kind of keeps going up, and it's just mineral deposits from how hard the water is that's coming out.
So someone already owned this land. So they actually raised money to buy this for millions of dollars. And the person that owned it was one of the biggest landholders in the country. And I mention that because it's just sort of an example of how, if I went piece by piece, a lot of that land is really accounted for. And there are people that live out there year round, or they have big ranches, and the lake bed kind of goes out into nothingness, but there is not a lot of, the only civilization further past that is a military base that's way out there, at some point. And it's not necessarily accessible, at least from my understanding, for major roads. So,
which they did some super entertaining flybys last year. That was insane. The military jets were everyone's just like, whoa. That was a first. I had not seen them come that close.
I had not seen that many jets fly that low for a while, but normally the military likes to do a little buzz every once in a while.
So what do you say the name of the nearest town is?
Gerlach. So it's got that Wild West feel. It's like a couple hundred people. It's got more bars than churches. But
And what do the people of Gerlach think?
A lot of them have kind of, I think the town has slightly grown and become populated by Burn. I'm always fascinated by some of my coworkers who've decided to move to Gerlach because, are you crazy? What? So why did you decide to do that?
I assume that it must be a big moneymaker for Gerlach too. Are there people who go into to town to buy ice or
it changes.
provisions?
Well, people move in.
That you don't get that kind of stuff there.
In terms of Bruno's, it's there's one guy that owns a hotel and has a restaurant, and that he has helped immeasurably and sort of.
But it's like the restaurant. I mean,
Yeah,
Right. There's one gas station.
right. You're not picking the good Taco
No,
Bell over the
no,
bad Taco
no.
Bell.
So
There's just one place to eat.
There's basically one 90-mile stretch.
You're assuming that somewhere out there is a good Taco Bell.
There's got to be one.
Oh, it's a ways away. So there's one 90-minute stretch that everyone drives down, and it goes through a reservation, and there's not everything on that road kind of is affected by it. And yeah, there are a lot of random considerations that the org makes to try to ease some of the stress on those communities, the infrastructure, all that stuff. It to the point where we have a whole team that just travels that traverse to pick up all the garbage that ends up, or people that dump stuff, or people's cars break down, they need tows. There's no one there to help them. So
there's a lot of stuff that pops up right before the event, with people selling stuff for people to grab at the last minute, bikes or raver gear, whatever they have. And there are storage facilities that have popped up right along that as you get close to it, where people store RVs, or they just have a unit that they can throw stuff
Really?
in. So,
And then just wait for the next year, huh?
yep. And then
Oh,
just pull
that's
it out of there.
interesting.
Not a lot, but there's a handful.
So, people who've been listening to this podcast, I'm sure, are waiting for this one. So, what's the situation out there as far as it's a free type space? So, I know that nudity goes hand in hand with Burning Man, right?
Nudities, yeah, great.
Nudity is allowed. I'd say less than 0.1% of the population is nude at any given moment.
Really? Because that's what I would be the whole time, just
Right?
buck naked.
Yeah,
That
well,
was
I mean, it's
one of the first things I did.
overwhelmingly, in my opinion, the people who are the happiest to be out there naked are men over about 45.
Okay. Well, I think
Sounds about right.
when I was in high school, we took a trip with my foreign language group to France and Italy. And when we were in southern France, we went to a nude beach. We had to take a cab. It was a big deal. And myself and my friend Jay Scott were like, we're going to go to a nude beach and it's going to be amazing. The only people who were at the nude beach were 85-year-old men.
Yep.
Just loving it. So our experience changed pretty drastically.
Yep, that's very similar to Burning Man.
But to me, that's
So
one of-
Burning Man's basically the locker room at the YMCA.
Kind of, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, occasionally there is some, 20-something girl that walks by, or, I don't see a whole lot of younger dudes walking around with nothing on. They're pretty
They
unusual.
stand out.
So
Yeah,
so
they've
that
seen it
is
every once in a while.
that is a myth. A Burning Man myth is that everyone's kind of naked all the
Yeah,
time.
that's a myth.
It is bathing suit weather. People are still, they're more scantily clad than they would be normally.
Yes.
And
And it's fun because you don't feel like if you walked out here wearing almost nothing, you feel like everyone would be staring at you.
you're also, would be more unique to something like Burning Man. There's a parade that's just tits. It's just called Critical Tits, and that's all.
Yep.
It's just
And it's a bike. It's a
few
bike
hundred
parade.
women just bike around. Now, in response to that, there's Critical Dicks. So if you want to get your dick out and bike with a few hundred dudes, you can do the same thing.
I don't like the idea of bicycling naked. That
Yeah.
seems
Better be your
like I
bike.
could hurt
Yeah.
myself. I've fallen off, and got my laces caught in the spokes
Yep,
before. So
yeah, it's risky.
I really talked myself up there, huh? So, Christina, from a female perspective, does it feel safe out there? Do you ever? Are there creepers out there?
So yes and no. Like I was saying, I mean, you feel different out there. I mean, you can dress however you want, wear as little as you want, and for the most part, it just feels like that's just the clothes you wore that day or didn't wear. You don't feel like everyone's staring at you just because of that. On the other hand, there are still people out there that can make you feel uncomfortable. It is a giant city. I'm a little insulated from being involved with DPW because they've really cracked down in the last 10 years, from my understanding, on any kind of inappropriate behavior or behavior that made other people feel unsafe or took advantage of them. And so that, and they work really hard to encourage women and sort of everyone to be aware of that, and to look out for each other, and to let people know when they're crossing a line and all that kind of stuff. So that when I'm there, I feel really quite safe. I did have some experiences last year where I finally was around other people, guys, where I didn't feel comfortable. And I didn't feel like I was at risk, but it sort of hammered home to me. Oh, right. It's not like that everywhere out here. These guys are out here. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel super unsafe to me because it's still pretty easy to turn to someone else and get help or backup or whatever. But it's a massive city. So there's still risks. It feels safer than home for the most part.
Interesting. And the community, excuse me, kind of polices itself a little bit out there, correct? You know, like you said, if there's somebody who's making a bunch of people uncomfortable, the community will kind of be like, hey, let's just, let's remember we're all experiencing this together.
More than here. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but I feel like it's more likely to happen there than here.
I think in general, one of the principles and one of the things happening is people are taking a lot of personal responsibility just for the things they need to survive. And so that sort of reflects then out into the rest of their space, whether it's emotional or physical in whatever way. So I can think of a lot of situations where like, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, but other times where I'm like, yeah, okay, I feel sober and willing and I can tell those people are pissed off. I'm going to go talk to those people that are obviously the problem or whatever.
You've used the term survive a few times in this conversation. And so to me, you are out there against the elements, and I imagine more often than not, it's not big, shiny RVs with giant air conditioning units. Do people ever go out there to die? Are there people who want to die at Burning Man, and that's kind of their intent? They're like, this is where I want to end. This is where I want to not wake up the next morning. And I only say that because I've been involved in a huge music festival where we've been told that by patrons, where it's like, my dad has cancer and this is where he wants to die. So he's going to have one last great weekend and he hopes not to make it home. And I'm like, that is so much work for me. Please make sure your dad at least gets off the property.
I think there's probably similar attitudes to that. I mean, I don't think we've experienced a whole lot of them. There was someone on DPW who did pass away in his sleep, basically. He had worked for years and that was really sad for a lot of people that knew him because we were out there working when it happened. I doubt he was upset about that. I suspect from everything I heard about him that he would have loved to choose that way to go. So I'm sure those people are out there.
What happens when something like that happens? I mean, is there a police presence out there at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that particular one happened early enough. It was actually
that was before the event.
It was actually better that it happened there for everyone that was close to him because the support system for them to exist for each other was there. Mm-hmm. I watched. My boss was a really close friend with Spuno, and I watched him sort of go through that. But for the sake of everybody, like it seems like they handled it very well. Everyone was very attentive, and they had all sorts of ceremonies and gatherings like to honor him and to talk about like the impact that he made. But like that's the ideal state. Like Burning Man literally has a flame at the center of it, and we had a guy last year that ran into the fire during the big burn on Saturday and committed suicide.
But in looking into that, it didn't sound like he came out there with that idea. Like that, from what everyone who knew him said, that was a bizarre aberration.
Right. And then
the
true circumstances of why he would allow him or be willing to do that are unknown. And it was very horrifying to everyone around him. But that happens as well. As far as the intentionality of the experience, yes, that's totally going to happen.
Are there, because you're talking about surviving, in the desert, what are some of the really big mistakes that first timers tend to make when they go out to Burning Man. Inexperienced burners.
You just don't drink enough water. I'd say that's hands down. You start getting really cranky, and someone reminds you that maybe you should drink some more water.
The general effects of dehydration are completely unknown to the average person, and because they're very subtle at first. And the thing is, some of the even more damaging effects, like isn't just physical ones. Like you will fuck up your relationships because you just got so testy and out of your mind that you pissed off the wrong person, or you said the wrong thing, and
or you get sick 2 days later because of it, and there goes the rest of your burn. I mean, you're just miserable. I mean, you have what amounts to an awful cold, and that is not a place you want that.
You're also surrounded by sort of these small mountains, and you don't realize the elevation that you're at either, unless you're paying a little bit of attention to the signs when you drive in. But why would you do that? So between that and just the general tendency to drink, I like the worst hangovers in the world. I drink less when I'm out there.
Yeah, we aren't huge partiers, so we're bad for that demographic.
I like to party a little bit.
We don't get drunk and party.
Yes, okay.
We have friends that do though, so we can observe. But that can mess you up. Just it's so easy to combine those two. You're already not drinking enough water probably, and then you're drinking beer in place of it, or everywhere you go there's a free bar. So it's
the other thing
a
is
lot of
people
alcohol.
just don't come prepared. So like they don't bring what they need, or they don't either they don't recognize just the overall intentionality of it, and so they don't have as full or dynamic experience as they could, because they were like, oh, I just I wanted to bring this one particular thing. Like they don't realize I think some of the opportunities. So
I'm gonna bring 2 pairs of board shorts, case of Busch Light, and I'm gonna let the festival take care of the rest.
Again, those people are out there. So
I always wonder how many people go out there and just kind of assume that everything will be all right, and then the kindness of a stranger or a group of strangers pretty much save their lives.
they're a minority, but they're there.
Based on so there's nothing out there, right? So when something goes wrong, like where do you find a locksmith? Where do you find a dentist? And I hear all sorts of stories of people who have like really genuinely like positive experiences because they managed to find somebody to help them or save them from their situation, and the gratitude that's exchanged is it's generative. One of the reasons I keep going is because I've already had things given to me that I feel like the only way I could hope to possibly reflect that is to keep participating and giving back to everybody in every circumstance. And in that aspect, it's kind of inspiring. But I have talked to people intentionally who've gone out there with the notion that they're going to bring nothing, and they're solely going to give. Like the guy was a body worker. Like when I met him, and that's all he was going to. That he had something to give, right? But it wasn't material at all, and he was kind of experimenting in that way. And that was actually before I had gone. It was my first year, and I was meeting with this big camp, and I was kind of vetting them to see if I wanted to join they had a big camp. It was like a couple hundred people, and that's what they did was body work. And I realized no one was sort of judging him for saying that he might do that. And so I thought, okay, well that's technically because he's doing that intentionally. He's not just standing on the side of the road, free Burning Man ticket. Like those people exist too. I don't know what happens to those people. I don't know how they make it. But you can. You would spend your whole event probably looking for the free pancakes and bacon every day, but you could you could manage that. Granted, you still had to produce the $400 or $500 to get in the door, and so it's going to filter out people that are completely destitute or incapable of driving a car sober enough to get through the gate. So there is a filter there a little bit.
We've had a lot of conversations sort of dispelling some of the myths my vanilla brain has thought of Burning Man over the years. So what I want to hear is from 2 Burning Man seasoned lovers of the fest. What are the things that you've seen that just like made your day, that you thought, wow, this is amazing, this is truly unique, something that sticks with you when you talk and think about Burning Man? What's what are some of the aspects? And I want to hear about paperwork. I want to hear about I want to hear about some of the art. I want to hear about some of the people or the ideas.
I mean, the spectacle part of it can be really impressive. You are going to see stuff out there that even if some of it gets saved and taken someplace else, it's never going to look the same as it does out there, in part because of that blank canvas aspect. And there are some, I mean, it's Burning Man, there are some huge fires and explosions, and they're all on purpose for the most part. I think what really sticks with me is the overall interactions with other people, though. The spectacle's amazing, but it's still just a spectacle. It's the way that people are interacting and the openness that you can find out there. It's not necessarily everybody, but a lot of the people out there are there because they want to interact with other people. They want to share an experience with whoever out there wants to share, and that's as open-ended as it sounds. And that sticks with me. Which is it's a lot harder to encapsulate for other people or explain to them or promise them than just saying, yeah, there was this really cool sculpture I saw. I mean, those happen too, but they're not what keeps me coming back.
Well, I think that's very interesting, very telling of the festival itself, that if it's the people, if it's the strangers, right? You're the strangers who become friends, whether they're friends for the next 15 minutes or 15 years. Mm-hmm. It's always interesting. I have people I know from, again, nowhere near Burning Man, but other music festivals who I know just as North Carolina. And only because that's where they said they're from, and I couldn't remember their names if I wanted to. But he's a third grade teacher from North Carolina, and we had 2 amazing nights partying together. So, for you, Ressl, since you're a regional representative,
yeah,
do you interact with a lot of Burning Man participants then during the year?
No,
interesting.
No, it's sort of a ghost town. We don't really get any feedback on the mailing lists or the Facebook group, which I don't think should surprise anyone. Like Fargo has an arts community, but North Dakota is fairly small. We don't have a lot of other things like that. I remember getting really excited one year when I found there was I can't remember what the event was called, but it was a art burning that Don Morgan helped to run, and they held it in the winter. And I got really excited, and then I realized they were burning art in silence as a form of basically this cathartic act. It was not a celebration.
We have that at Burning Man too.
Get
it's called
excited
the Temple.
About. And I even met with her at one point, can I take this over and make this something cool? And then as I talked to her, I realized, oh, this is completely different than what I was imagining it would be. No, I get most of my chops out of interacting with my friends from LA or when I'm traveling, and we're all loosely distributed geographically, but we're all talking about what we're going to do or the ideas that we have, things we want to do and create. So it's been, and then just engaging the arts community in Fargo in general, or the other aspects of it.
Do either of you take pictures or anything while you're there, or do you just come home and the sunburn is how you show, how great of a time you had?
He lets me record it. The first couple times I went out there, I took an old Polaroid, and I took several of those. I've kind of toned that down just because it is a little more involved. And there's something cool about that it takes a little while to set that up, and then it's not a guarantee. Maybe it refuses to come out of the camera and it's ruined and all that kind of stuff. But I also try to record on, a camera, phone, just because I know there are people back home that want to see what I'm doing, family, friends. And he's gathered that I do that, and he's perfectly happy to. It feels weird sometimes, though. There are times where I actively do leave it somewhere else while we go out and do stuff, because it can feel really meta in a bad way.
What do family, friends, and employers think about you doing this? Because you're talking about you're not talking about just being out there for a week. You're out there for a significant amount of time.
I describe it as I'm basically pregnant every year.
Exactly like that.
I require, but I wouldn't describe it to you. I would assume you have no idea what I'm going to talk about, and I'm already probably wearing this sweatshirt I'm wearing right now. It says Department of Public Works. I'd say, well, JJ, if I work for you, I have a seasonal job with the Department of Public Works Nevada for 6 weeks a year, and the notion attached to that is that if you like the work that I do and you understand that I'm still dedicated and capable and talented, within what I'm doing. Most of that is actually coming from this thing that I'm doing. It challenges me in a way, and I draw from it in a way that it's largely made me who I am. And so I uphold that to the same standard that I do my full-time job. Now, because of that, I have to make sort of this compromise in negotiating for my salary or the types of jobs that I can take. Now, luckily, the job I have now, I feel like my bosses understand that, or they're willing to put up with it, and so we work it out. And every year it's a little different, or it's a little bit of a challenge, but I do everything I can. It's difficult to leave any company for that period of time and still have everyone consider you indispensable because you're gone for that period. Some of my stuff I can do remotely, design related work you can kind of get away with a little bit. So. But I don't ever look forward to getting new jobs or the interviews that I do go to where I have to explain it. I usually focus on just establishing who I am first and what I can bring to the table. But it is difficult. No,
yeah, I've been fortunate with it. So,
but in terms of bringing stuff back, so I usually harvest everything everyone else does, and I've written the last 6 years and do a sort of a postmortem and a reflection on everything that's happened. In the last 2 years, I made videos. Because I realized no one wants to read things that are related to Burning Man. They want to see the pictures or the videos. Yep.
And I, the last couple of years, intentionally filmed stuff because I had a little project I had in mind that I wanted to do. So with 2 years, I had enough footage to put that together, which is a whole 1 minute video, but still.
Well, very cool stuff. Thank you guys for joining me in the studio today. Christina Johnson, Mike Ressl. You're great ambassadors for Burning Man. And if I knew that my pasty white skin could last for more than 25 minutes out there, I would be there in a heartbeat because it does sound like something.
There's a lot of free sunscreen too. People are happy to pass that out too. Oh yeah.
Especially if I'm walking around buck naked, you think?
Well,
Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't get to your old man bath that we were talking about before air.
You're gonna laser into that at some point.
Yeah, we'll get you guys back on the show again. Thank you guys very much for stopping in.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. For more info, including how you can help us keep the lights on by donating to our Patreon, you want to visit www.jjmeetsworld.com, or you can hit us up on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're not on MySpace because it's not 2004 anymore. And if you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World or find that really awesome episode that first introduced you to the podcast, subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. And of course, you can find info on shows I'm performing in at www.linebenders.com. Maybe you'd like to have us out to a corporate event. We are hilarious, and you'll be talking about it at the water cooler for days. I guess this is the end of this particular podcast. Thank you guys very much for joining me here. And if you didn't like this, tell everyone that you were watching the news.